Hello, Martin Bennedik here for chesspuzzle.net. I've been very busy working on Puzzle Academy and I wanted to show you some of the progress that we've made. Um, Here you can see the updated Puzzle Academy dashboard. Here you can see the total progress, and these color-coded bars show you how many skill levels you've mastered. So I've mastered 176 levels. I'm practicing 42 levels and I can unlock an additional 28 levels and 77 levels are locked. That's the total progress, and you can also see the progress for each of the courses. For example, here in the fundamentals course, I've mastered already 13 out of 14 and I'm still practicing one of the levels. And in tactics, I've mastered 29 levels, practicing 6, can unlock 3 new ones, and 30 are still locked. You can also see this on the curriculum now. So the curriculum shows you all the skills, and here at the bottom of each skill you can see which levels are available, and the green ones I've mastered already, and the orange one I'm practicing. And let's say if we scroll down here to checkmate patterns, there's a new checkmate patterns that I'm going to show you. It's Morphy's mate, and you see there are 2 levels available, and the first one I've mastered and the second one I'm practicing. And if I click on the skills Morphy's mate, I get to this skill details page, and here I can also see both levels, and I can click here on guide to see a guide about Morphy's mate. So here we get the definition. In Morphy's mate, a bishop or a queen on the diagonal checkmates the king on the edge of the board, and a rook prevents the escape. So you can see this here in the little diagram. If we move the bishop here, as indicated by the arrow, it will be checkmate with the bishop, and the rook here prevents that the king can escape to g8. And then there's an explanation. Paul Morphy was a very famous chess player. He was the best chess player in the world. And you can actually see this if you click on this link or on the image. You get to our page about Paul Morphy, and there's some little text about him, and here's the puzzles which are based on games by Paul Morphy, and you can also click here on the read more link to go to the Wikipedia page, and there you can read much more about Paul Morphy. Yeah, and then in this guide you get some examples. You can also click on the examples to solve these puzzles. And then you get a list of related patterns. Here you can compare them with these little diagrams. So Pillsbury's mate is quite similar to Morphy's mate, but the roles of the rook and bishop are reversed. So here you checkmate with the rook, and the bishop prevents the escape of the king. So now let's look at some examples from the new skills that were published during the holiday season. So here's a very nice example from Morphy's mate level 2. So you can see that the rook already prevents the escape of this king in the corner. So if we start with bishop 3 c3 check, then the rook can capture it. And if we then play queen d4, white can still prevent checkmate, for example, by playing queen a3. So the solution is to start with queen d4 check, and if the rook captures the queen, the rook will be deflected from defending the c3 square, and we can checkmate. And then we can also see this on the solution page. Here we get the explanation that the black queen deflects white's rook away from protecting the square c3, and then it's Morphy's mate. Here is an example for a new skill where you have to give a discovered check followed by a checkmate. And this one's actually quite tricky. You have the king, the knight, and the rook already joining the attack on the black king, and white really has to find a checkmate here, because otherwise black's pawn on h2 is going to queen and the game will be lost. And yeah, there's various tries that you can think of, like rook h8 check, king b7, and then it leads to nowhere. There's not another check other than going back with the rook. Also, like king c6, threatening checkmate doesn't work because of the black rook being able to give check here on g6. So the solution is actually to give a check with the knight, and then give the discovered check with the knight and go with the knight to c6, and then it's an Arabian mate here. Okay, so that was the new skill, discovered check followed by checkmate. So that actually happens very often, and you can also read the guide there and see more examples and then learn this skill. Yeah, and then I've added a couple of new skills where you have to defend, and the way how you defend isn't obvious, because there's a trap set by your opponent, and you have to be very careful and avoid that trap. So here white's just given a check with the pawn, and there's two moves that you can make with your king. You can go to f7 or e7, and one of them is wrong, and here you have to avoid the fork. If you go to f7, then white can play knight e5 and fork the rook and the king. So the correct solution is to go to e7. And if you go to the solution page, you can actually see the line that you have to see for your opponent and that you have to avoid. So it says here not king f7 because of knight e5 check, king goes away and knight takes c6. So if you get such a puzzle wrong, always check the solution page and it will show you the line that you have to avoid. Here is another example. You are in check again, and there's two squares available. You can go to g1 or you can go to g3, and only one of them is correct. So I think this is an easy example that if you go to g1, then it's queen f1 mate. So the correct solution is to go to g3. And again, on the solution page, it will show you king g3 solution, but you shouldn't play king g1 because of queen f1 checkmate. Okay, and this skill is called defend against check and avoid checkmate. And there's actually 3 levels for the skill. And in each of the levels, you just have to make one move uh, and defend against the check. But what becomes harder when the level increases is the checkmate from your opponent that you have to see. So here it's just checkmate in 1, but in level 3 it's checkmate in 3 that you have to see for your opponent. And I've got an example here which I actually failed to solve myself. Um, you can pause the video and see if you are able to solve it. So here we are in check again. White could play rook g3, but that would immediately lose the rook, as there's also a bishop here on d6 attacking g3. So there's two options where you can go. You can go to h3 or h5. So and I really wasn't sure what's going to happen here, and I just guessed, and I played king h5 and got sorry, that was not the correct move. So now if we go to the solution page, we can again see what line we have to avoid. So, and the solution is king h3 and not king to h5 because of rook h8 check, king g6. Yeah, and that far I calculated, but now there's a quiet move and a mating net. So here black can play bishop f8, guarding the last escape square here on g7 and preparing actually rook h6 mate. As the bishop on g5 is actually pinned by the rook on g2, and the bishop cannot capture the rook. So, and then after any move, it's basically rook h6 checkmate. Well, I guess white could delay a checkmate by one move here with rook g3, but then just rook g3 followed by rook h6 mate anyway. So that's why this line isn't included here. It's not something that you really have to see, that you can delay the checkmate by another move. Okay, these were some examples. I've also prepared a blog post about this, and I'm going to make an updated gameplay video, so stay tuned for those.